can't see Teams while this is while my screen is
Yeah,
sharing.
that's okay. That's okay. So I'll give you the signal.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna message me on WhatsApp.
Yeah, man. Hello? Hello? Yes. Hi, girls. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's all right. It's all right. Don't worry. I don't want you to push.
There's a distance between us. It's getting hard to reach out. Haven't seen you in seasons, but all I hear is your voice. I know my limits, you can break me down, but I'll stay till the finish line. And I've been counting minutes for quite some time now, just to see you again. And I've been counting days to get away, to see you again, see you again. Been fighting ways to get away, to see you again, see you again. We got millions of reasons to let it all go. Hope we're not too broken. I know I'm not always strong. And I've been counting days to get away, to see you again, see you again. Been fighting ways to get away, to see you again, see you again.
Throughout time, the planet has shaped all life.
The planet has shaped all life.
The planet has shaped all life.
But now, in the era of the human, we are shaping the planet.
And truthfully, we are not doing a good job at it yet. Our actions are putting a lot of pressure on the world. Just look at 2020 with COVID-19, extreme weather, and rampant wildfires. People have created this mess, but we can fix it.
Empowered people can become agents of their own destiny. The world may seem stuck in its own ways, but we can take actions to create a new normal, whether that's expanding the role of women in society or using cleaner energy.
In too many countries, fossil fuels remain the primary source of energy, but clean alternatives like solar power will help reduce our carbon emissions. These alternatives need to be made accessible and affordable without using too much of other finite resources.
And we must learn to harness the power of nature at the same time as we protect its beauty and wonder. Moving to protect, sustainably manage and restore ecosystems in a way that promotes well-being.
Too often, the decisions of a few people or countries hurts the most vulnerable people across the world. For all of us to flourish now and into the future, we must understand that we are all connected. The choices you make impact the whole world around you.
Shaping the planet means
Taking bold steps.
Bold steps for humans to survive and thrive in this new era.
If we are going to change the world,
we need you.
We need you.
We need you, our global leaders, to take bold action now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Janelle Tomlinson, youth climate activist, and this afternoon I will be moderating the discussion. So first off, let me say welcome to UNDP's Post-Human Development Report 2020, this our very special event, Caribbean Youth Speak. And you know, this conversation will seek to bring about a sort of regional dialogue on the Anthropocene. And it's a word that may sound a little bit strange, a word that is very new to many of us. And hopefully by the end of this afternoon's discussion, we would have learned a bit more, and eventually it would become a word that we would be, you know, comfortable using, and other persons would be so inclined to do as well. So what we hope to do is that eventually it will become a word that everybody will know to mean the age of man. Now, the Human Development Report, which is pretty much the reference document on which this afternoon's event has been inspired, seeks to sort of help to define what this Anthropocene is. And it says that the Anthropocene signals that we're the first set of people to live in an age in which the dominant risk to our survival is ourselves. Let's just sit and absorb that statement for a bit. It's pretty much saying to us that the Anthropocene is the era in which humans are pretty much the biggest threat to our very own existence. And this report, it has further highlighted that for the first time in our history, the most serious, the most immediate risks are human-made. They are in fact caused by humans or actions or activities, and they're unfolding at planetary scales from COVID-19 to climate change. You know, these two big C's, they're pretty much, or what I say, hazards. They're pretty much catastrophes that have been caused by man. And of course, that would therefore mean that we have a critical role to play in alleviating, you know, some of these impacts. So scientists have named and they've known about the Anthropocene for years. However, the UN, and in particular, a UN agency, has taken the unprecedented step to acknowledge this new geological era and to carefully propose how humanity should pursue development moving forward while seeking to ease pressures we have placed on the planet. So prioritizing sustainable development. And of course, we have heard about the importance that young people have to play, not only for the future, but for today as well. And as such, we recognize that we will have to one day take the reins of managing and alleviating this global crisis. And with this in mind, youth leaders this afternoon from Belize, Jamaica, Suriname, the Bahamas, and Trinidad and Tobago will sort of kickstart a conversation on the Anthropocene with the support of the UNDP country offices across Belize, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Suriname. So once again, I want to welcome everybody to this event, everybody who registered on Zoom, to those tuned in via Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We're encouraging everyone tuned in to tweet if there's any particular thing that stands out to you throughout the event. We're asking you to, you know, use the hashtags Caribbean Youth Speak, HDR 2020, and Anthropocene, along with your little tidbits that you'd like to tweet or share it on Facebook or Twitter. We're also encouraging you to share the live as well and to encourage other persons to tune in so that we can ensure that the information does not just stay with us, but that everybody is able to participate, to learn, and to share and hear from each other. And we'll ensure that whatever questions are posed, they're asked in your name. So as mentioned earlier, today's discussion has been inspired by the Human Development Report 2020, and it is dubbed The Next Frontier, Human Development and the Anthropocene. And, you know, just to provide some context, we'd like to share a brief summary of the report, its main findings, and some key recommendations via motion graphic video. So sit back as we seek to delve into the report and to just get a summary of what it is that came out of this year's findings. So something that stood out from that presentation for me was how it spoke about us leveraging support and, you know, collaborating to ensure transformational change. And this event this afternoon is a testament to that. And it has shown how all the different UNDP country offices have partnered in this effort to bring Caribbean youth together, you know, in an effort to speak on this issue of the Anthropocene. So thank you so much for that presentation. And as we seek to move further, and I know that we have, you know, gone a bit more into the report and its findings, I'd like to just hear quickly from you, some of the members of the audience. And I have here a quick poll that I'm going to encourage you to use the next 30 seconds to complete. And it's just to get your idea, your perception of whether or not you think that Anthropocene has been having negative impacts on your country. So just quickly use the next 30 seconds to complete, and then I'll just do a quick discussion and summary of the polls, and then we will go further into the program. Okay, so it's 57% of persons have voted, 59%, great. Let me just give it a bit more time to allow other persons to complete. Okay, so we now have 70%, 72% of the votes. And thus far, we see where majority of persons have strongly agreed with 59% and another 37% agreeing, and then 5% saying that they're unsure. So the good thing is we don't see anybody disagreeing or strongly disagreeing. So there is in fact some amount of agreement from attendees that the Anthropocene has been impacting their countries negatively. So for two very brave persons, I'm just going to ask you to just in one sentence to in the chat highlight how you have seen the Anthropocene era or the Anthropocene period having any negative impacts on your country. Just two persons quickly before we get into the other aspects of the event. So let's look for those comments. Okay, so Ismar Andrade has said deforestation. Thank you so much for that. And okay, thank you for that, Emma. Emma has said an increase in mining activities. That's a very timely one, particularly based on what is happening in Jamaica currently. Alex has said seaweed growth and overfishing. Ken has said rising sea levels. Okay, thank you so much. And in the Q&A, yes. All right, perfect. All right, so thank you so much. Single-use plastics and more frequent and intense hurricanes from climate change. So thank you so much to everyone, you know, for just highlighting how they have seen how human activities have been impacting negatively on their individual countries. So thank you so much, and you will get other opportunities to share your thoughts and your ideas as we go further into the event. So the highlight of this afternoon is pretty much our panel discussion that we will be having with, as I mentioned before, our young climate champions, or our young champions across varying areas. But before I get into that, I'd like to have a quick video presentation which speaks to the special Human Development Report on COVID-19, skills, pandemic, and different issues. So I'm going to ask for that video now before we get into our panel discussion. Okay, so let us move directly into the discussion. It seems we have already viewed the video that was supposed to be shown. So let us just go directly into the height of this afternoon's event, which is our panel discussion. And here we have a panel with, as I mentioned before, Caribbean youth who will seek to highlight the different perspectives on the Anthropocene and the skill sets and the experience that we have on our panel today reflects some of the potential solutions that have come out of the Human Development Report. And I'd just like to firstly introduce the first three panelists that we will hear from. And the first one is Jeffy Gomez, and he's a Senior Credit Officer with the Development of Finance Corporation of Belize. Secondly, my dear friend Michael Morgan, which is an SDG advocate from Jamaica, working in the area of climate action. And another one of my friends as well, Naravni Salons, who's a scientific assistant at the National Assembly of Suriname on environment and climate-related regulation topics. Thank you so much to our three panelists for joining us and, for wanting to partake in such interesting and a timely conversation. I'm just going to ask that you all turn on your videos so that you can have a very engaging discussion with the attendees. But the questions that I'd like to pose this afternoon, the first one is, how have human activities throughout the Anthropocene impacted your country? And I'm going to ask Jeffy to go first, followed by Michael and then Naravni, and then just a follow-up question. And I'd like to hear about your work as young advocates, as young champions, and how you have been, working to sort of reverse some of these impacts. So the first one is, what are the impacts that you have seen? And then secondly, how you, through your work, have been seeking to address some of these. So Jeffy, let's hear from you.
Pleasant good evening, everyone, and thank you, Madam Moderator. Okay, I will do my explanation on three major subheadings. The first subheading is the blue economy. We are having effects due to the Anthropocene done by humans on the blue economy. And what can we see is coastal erosion. For example, in Belize, we are having severe coastal erosion in the south. People living for many years on the coast, they cannot no longer live on the coast. Either they have to be relocated, or what we are doing is basically doing coastal reclamation. But as you know, coastal reclamation is very, very expensive. Also, what we have seen is ocean or sea level rise, acidification. So basically, there's a scarce resource of our resources in the ocean. For example, in the case of Belize, the fisheries sector is being damaged. There's a scarcity of fish products, conchs, and this the people depend on this livelihood. So basically, what are we doing? Basically, we are turning to alternative livelihoods for these individuals. Probably they can do open a shop, or probably they can do tours or get into the tourism sector. Thirdly, what we are seeing under the blue economy is mangrove deforestation. And this is very important because we have to protect the mangroves. The mangroves protect us from hurricane and severe weather conditions from the coast. My second topic is agriculture economics. As an economist, I like to speak on economics. What we are seeing in the agriculture sector is extreme drought. Just a few months ago, from the months of April to September, Belize has gotten a lot of losses due to drought. Farmers have lost many of their income, a lot of their income due to the loss of their products, their small crops. So what can we do to reverse this effect? Basically, we are assisting with irrigation for farmers, but again, this is very costly. Also, what we are seeing is extreme floods. After the drought, we saw that an influx of water came. So basically in Belize, from October until now, we are having massive water coming down from the higher terrains. And this is devastating all small crops, even the cattle and poultry industry. Also, we see when there's drought or when there's a lot of water, we see what comes along with it, pests and disease. So what can we do to mitigate the pest and disease? We're establishing early warning systems so the farmers are aware of the type of pests on the ground, the limitation of use of chemicals and insecticides to the soil for them to be more productive. Basically, in all, we are training them for them to be prepared for what is the Anthropocene. And thirdly, my third concept is development banking. I work for the Development Finance Corporation, and what we are doing is that we have saw the lack of financing for young entrepreneur. We have seen the lack of financings for women. So what we are doing is basically we have created a policy product for gender equality. So whereby we can have equity and equality, and we are developing special products for young people so they can have access, and especially for women, and so we can battle the effects of what is climate change and the effects of Anthropocene, as we human are the major cause of it. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for that. I really wanted to do a recap, but I'll wait until we hear from the other panelists as well. So Michael, can we hear from you?
Yes, just want to say thank you to UNDP for this opportunity for young people in the Caribbean, especially to speak on issues that they're facing. So in terms of Jamaica and the whole the Anthropocene, we're seeing the effects of that. I'm going to be focusing on two main areas: flooding and or extractive industries. So firstly, with the increase in emissions from usually larger economies, there is going to be an increase in general earth temperatures, and that increases the frequency and intensity of storms. And back in October and November of this year, we saw that even though Jamaica was not directly hit by the numerous storms, we still were severely affected by the outer band due to flooding. It's projected that the cost of the flooding from storms, the outer bands of storms Zeta and Eta, would cost over about $54 million. That's the projected cost right now, and that's going directly, affecting farmers. It's affecting their livelihood and how they're able to feed their families and support the local economy, and that's a major issue. And the other way that we're seeing human impact is with our extractive industries. So the case of the Puerto Bueno Mountains and how there is this contention between finding a balance between sustainable development and economic growth, but also preserving our natural resources. In that specific case, you have a mountain with endemic species, meaning that they're only found in Jamaica, as well as having a limestone forest. And the major characteristic of limestone is that it's a porous rock, which allows the filtration of water, which is very important for the biodiversity of the region and also for water supply for the surrounding community. And therefore, our protective agencies have said that it would be degrading the environment if we were to go forward with mining and extraction. And then unfortunately, that recommendation was glossed over, and it's really unfortunate to see that human impact and the need for economic growth cannot be balanced with sustainable development. But as you know, the videos that we just saw show this is that we don't have a planet B, we don't have an option B, and once those forests are gone, they're gone. There's no real finding a way to recreate that environment. We're going to be disturbing a very crucial environment in Jamaica, and it's very important that we understand that these are the direct impacts of man on the planet that are unsustainable. And at the end of the day, what I hope will come from this discussion with my other colleagues is a way that young people can push the conversation forward, to instead of seeing the Anthropocene climate change as something terrible, we're seeing it as an opportunity to diversify, innovate, and lead to greater development throughout the region.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Michael. And Nooravani?
Yes, thank you very much, Janelle, and hello, everyone. Um, what do I think of the impacts of Anthropocene in Suriname? This is the following I have to say. Actually, Suriname is actually a blessed country. We have 93% forest coverage, which makes us the richest country on earth. And we also have a very diverse community, which is actually with different ethical backgrounds, cultures, and traditions, which makes us very unique as a nation. The human behavior actually in the past few years has been influenced by convenience, consumerism, and capitalism to such a degree that it is actually harming the nature and Mother Earth as we know it. But we forget actually one thing, and that is everything is connected on every level. In Suriname, therefore, there are many challenges when it comes to the negative impacts of the Anthropocene for Suriname. First of all, I would like to point out that there are threats to the forest, the interior, or water resources and ecosystems. Activities such as gold mining in the interior, where they use harsh chemicals and there is a lot of deforestation going on, is actually one of the biggest threats for our forests. There is also wood logging going on. And when we think of animals, there is a lot of poaching going on with our wildlife. That is the first. Second, the coastal zone is at high risk. 80% of the population is concentrated in the coastal zone area. And because of the sea level rising, which is caused by rising temperatures worldwide, and the low-lying coastal zone area, the population, the 80%, is at high risk. Second. And third, there is a change in temperatures and precipitation. In year 2017, I did a research on climate change in Suriname, and the results were actually very saddening. The temperatures are rising, the precipitation is decreasing since 1975. And since everything is connected, this will have a ripple effect on the ecosystem and all the other resources that we have. Yes. Janelle, second question as well. Hello? Hello? I don't hear you. Yeah?
The second question, it was in relation to your particular work and how you were helping to reverse, right, some of the negative impacts.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, as stated on the flyer, there was mention that we want to reverse the impacts of the Anthropocene. In my opinion, there is actually no reversing because the damage is already done and it's actually continuing. The earth is actually healing herself by trying to bring a balance in the occurred disruption. And the Anthropocene is actually not a bad thing, but the negative impacts of the Anthropocene caused by choices that are not aligned with nature are. And actually, therefore, I have the opinion that better choices need to be made. I stand for sustainable living with nature, green entrepreneurship, green technology, and digitization, raising collective consciousness and awareness, adaptation, mitigation, preparedness, and readiness measures. We heard all of these terms before. And these are actually the key fundamentals which I promote and carry in my daily work and during volunteering. For example, last year we did a pop-up event in the capital city where we shared knowledge about climate change and had actually conversations one-on-one with 50 people. And from that the experience from there is that people were very hungry for information. And last year I also organized together with Bernard a workshop for youth between age 14 and 21, and where we promote sustainable living, sustainable agriculture, and interconnectedness. And it was a huge success. But this year, unfortunately, COVID-19 impacted the world, and all the activities are actually on hold. but we plan on continue it next year and with the adjusted measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Naravni. And just to summarize what all three of you would have highlighted, so Jeffrey spoke to the blue economy and the damages specifically to fisheries, as well as mangrove destruction. And he also spoke of the loss of agricultural produce as a result of drought. And in response, some of the activities that were being implemented included irrigation, alternate livelihoods. And I liked the one about the gender and the youth sort of policies that were helping, to develop certain knowledge products. So thank you for that contribution, Jeffrey. And in summarizing, Michael, who looked specifically at flooding and extractive industries, and he also looked at sometimes how decisions do not align with what would be best and what would help to, create sustainability, and the need for, the youth in that conversation and having youth at the forefront of change. So thank you so much for that contribution, Michael. And finally to Naravni, who spoke about mining and deforestation and the importance of, these sorts of avenues that help to bring about knowledge and awareness, and how eager persons are to be engaged. That is something that is especially, useful and something that is encouraging to hear. So thank you so much to all three of you for your contributions. And now I will move to our second cohort of panelists who I would like to ask the same question. And these three panelists are Céline France. I hope I pronounced your name properly. And she belongs to the Warao and Lokono people along the lower Corantin River in West Suriname, and is also a master's student undertaking studies in sustainable development. The other panelist is Kerwin Mullings, and is a senior at the University of the Bahamas, pursuing a bachelor's degree in small island development studies. And a dear friend and advocate, Alpha, son of Trinidad and Tobago, who is the founder of Y Farm. We Help Youth Farm, which is a globally recognized and award-winning nonprofit organization. So thank you so much as well to the three of you for wanting to join and wanting to share. And again, I'd like to pose a similar question. How have you seen human activities as a result of this Anthropocene era impact your country, and highlight as well some of the work that you would have been doing as a young person in the space, to start to alleviate some of these challenges? So first, I'd like to hear from Céline.
Good evening, everyone. And I also want to thank UNDP for providing this platform to share my experience with all of you. Thank you. So I would like to speak on the perspectives of indigenous peoples from Suriname. And since time immemorial, indigenous peoples have been able to live in harmony with nature, and through sustainable use and care for the environment has resulted in the environment and biodiversity being kept in balance and preserved within their living environment. And what we have seen is that due to human activities, increased activities within these areas, the influence on our way of living in our own environment has had very negative impacts on our way of living, especially on our own self-determined sustainable development that we as indigenous people like to pursue. Some of the threats, my colleague Sufarni has already mentioned that most of the indigenous communities in Suriname, they live also in the forested areas. So when we are speaking to threats towards the natural resources, towards our forests, this also means that there are threats to the indigenous communities who are heavily dependent on the natural resources. For example, the rivers that we also use for drinking water, for example. We also have the issue of illegal logging that takes place within our territories. So these impact our livelihoods, our way of living, and especially our self-determined development as we want to pursue this. I am currently working on a project that is focused on empowering indigenous communities organizations to advocate for their rights on a national level, but also on an international level. And within this process, we have a certain method where we we analyze, we help indigenous organizations to analyze their own context where we are living right now. Also, what we have had within our culture, within our tradition, and how this has helped us to survive in this era. So in our project, we focus on the capacities that our indigenous communities have to survive, and we also focus on how they can transfer that knowledge onto the youth and also other sectors within our country. And another step within this process is also not only analyzing our own situation better, but also be able to translate that into information that will also be understood by the non-indigenous sectors within our country. So the knowledge of our people is not only a knowledge that we will have to keep for ourselves, but especially in these times where we see that the activities of our neighbors are also negatively affecting ourselves, but also negatively affecting their future, their children. It is of utmost importance that our traditional knowledge can be translated in a very understood manner, that our knowledge can also be used and understood by other people, and also they can also learn and apply this knowledge and these perspectives in their daily lives. And building on that, we also take into this process an action planning method, where we not only talk about how it has been, but also looking into opportunities to continue our way of living. And this is a very difficult time where we will need to translate our knowledge into specific activities, so that it also can contribute to sustaining the way we live within our own environment, but also contribute to the wider society in Suriname, so that we can indeed say that we can contribute to keeping the balance and to pursue a healthy life in the areas where we live and where we have our livelihood as a contribution to the whole of Suriname. So this is in short what I would like to share tonight with all of you from the perspectives of indigenous peoples in Suriname. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I will, as I said, just do a quick summary of some of my key takeaways from each of the panelists and what they would have highlighted. So next we will hear from our colleague from the Bahamas.
Okay, good day, everyone. Good day, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it a lot. And so moving on to the question. So, well, some of the effects that humans have on the environment in the Bahamas, it could be widely seen. You know, since tourism is the #1 source of income for our economy, coastal development can be observed along our shorelines. The thing is, some of these coastal development projects that are happening in the Bahamas are not sustainably sound at all. Usually with these projects, there is a lot of degradation of the natural ecosystem. For example, a mangrove estuary would have to be eradicated in order to make room for stuff like a marina. This is not good because mangroves are nursery for an economically important species, such as the Nassau grouper, spiny lobster, and conch. They also protect coastlines from storm surges. The communities that live near the destroyed mangrove ecosystems are the first ones to be affected affected by these actions. They experience increased flooding in the areas, and that makes the area a high risk for when a hurricane passes through. This practice in itself shows a lack of integration within the three pillars of sustainability, being social, environmental, and economic development. It is important to note that taking away our natural defenses also exposes us to high environmental risks when a natural disaster visits. The removal of these systems increases the cost to repair the damages, which slows down our economic development. Right now, like many other countries, the Bahamas is suffering the effects of the COVID-19 situation. And it really exposed the systematic inequalities that exist within my country. Like one of my colleagues, Mr. Evans, stated that just because we do not see them does not mean that they do not exist. There are groups of people who have suffered and are still suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic. If you do not see these people, it does not mean that they are not needing our help. There were a lot of businesses being shut down during the pandemic. I cannot imagine the stress that the family of these establishments, the owners, and the people who have built their careers and life stories working there. I cannot imagine the stress they all have been going through. This is the reality we live in. And we as young people, we need to come together and provide solutions so that we can have a better control on the way our human development affects the earth. We all need to sit back and think, should we risk it all or should we reduce the damage, get our act together and come up with a better sustainable solution? And for the work that I am doing, I am currently an intern at the Cat Island Conservation Institute. And the work we do there is absolutely game changing. Okay, so you see, a lot of the times our everyday citizens do not get the opportunity to participate in things that are going to change and shape their futures. Usually the scientist comes into the community, they don't necessarily say anything to the community members, but they do the research in that community. Then afterwards, they gather the findings of that research and then present it to the institutions or the government. Then afterwards, all of a sudden, in that community, you're hearing about new policies and changes that will have a huge impact on their livelihood. And it is a shock for them because, you know, they were thinking everything is going to go business as usual. But now this scientist comes in and does a bunch of secret research in our community and they want to be changing up everything. Well, my work focuses mainly on climate action, climate justice, and citizen science. With our work, we work with the community, engaging them in the scientific process. We create meaningful, genuine relationships with people of that community, because it really is the people of the community who drives the sustainable efforts of that community. If we can make them aware of sustainable practices and solutions, then it would make the job of reversing the impacts of the Anthropocene that much easier, because now the people are aware and they are educated. They are educated to the point where they can join in the discussion about climate change and environmental conservation and be equal contributors to the solutions of the problems that exist within the communities. So I really love the work that we are doing in this organization because it engages the community members. We are creating the necessary foundations to be able to co-create solutions together. You know, we can't do everything by ourselves, and there are people who know the areas better than us simply because they have been living in that area their whole lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very detailed response. And now over to Alpha.
Hi, greetings everyone. Thank you, Janelle, for the wonderful introduction. Thank you for doing a lovely job in moderating thus far. It's an absolute pleasure to see you and to be part of this wonderful panel with all these superstars from the Caribbean. You know, so I hail from Trinidad and Tobago, and as many other small islands, small developing island states, you know, you have issues with rising sea levels. You have issues with fisher folks now having a lot harder time at sea to be able to harvest fish and to be able to come back safely as well. You know, in Trinidad and Tobago, we find there's a lot of stories popping up where fishermen are missing. Some of them are, you know, they are being lost at sea, etc. And that is quite a challenge presently. Of course, we have increased flooding as well during the rainy season. And I like to say, if the rainy season actually exists anymore, because sometimes there's rain, there's sun, there's back to rain. So I think, you know, the usual growing up when we had rainy season, dry season, that is a big challenge as well. I mean, even for farmers in particular as well, you know, we're not sure when we're going to get water. We're not sure when we're going to get sun. So it's a real unpredictable challenge where the weather is concerned. And also for farmers as well too, there's a lot of hillside erosion that is happening now as well. You know, previously maybe, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago that wasn't such a big issue, you know, but now you have mass hillside erosion happening. So, you know, where you would usually farm without any issues on the hillside, it's now, you know, your soil is being eroded. And of course, there's a lot of loss of coastal habitats as well too. So those are some of the major issues, you know, and my work, you know, with YFARM really seek to inform children from an early age to understand the importance of playing a role in society and playing a role in adapting to climate change, you know. So I always say that, you know, we cannot wait until university to teach young people about food security. And we cannot wait till we get a PhD to learn about climate change adaptability. You know, so it's important, you know, understanding the transformative years of condition in one's mind is between birth and 12, you know, and it's important that we be able to let our young people know, our children know, you know, from a very early age about climate change and not turn it into some big scientific thing, you know, and being able to understand that climate change, food security, how it's related, how it affects our future if we don't act right now. Right, so you know, so we have created superhero characters to help us do this, telling stories, using poetry, using spoken word, using music, right, and being able to really reach the children from the ground up, right. I mean, food security in Trinidad and Tobago, for those of you who may not know, of course, we were a very oil dependent country, and again, I mean, my favorite saying right now is that the soil is the new oil and the grass is the new gas, because oil prices are going right down. A barrel of soil now might cost more than a barrel of oil, you know, so it's about promoting that now and being able to understand that agriculture is definitely our way forward. But of course, I know many of my colleagues before really spoke about you know, that indigenous practices that we must develop for agriculture. So one of our core things that we are doing is developing the School of Agriculture. And we'll be launching this in February 2021, God's willing. And one of our major faculties is food and heritage, you know, understanding the relationship between food and heritage. We cannot continue as normal. And you know, we all fond of technology, but you know, how safe, how sound, how healthy, how does it affect our planet, right? So with our major principles with regards to our school, we would be talking about people, planet, purpose, passion, and you know, being able to then lead to profits, but not profits first, you know, and it's about flipping the script. Because I think in previous, you know, we were just taught to go to business school and you learn to make a profit. You learn to make a profit. And whatever happens to the planet, who cares, you know? So this is the time now where we would be flipping the script and ensuring that we look at planet and people and purpose first. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Alpha. And just to, look at some of the key things that came from the three of you. So Saline spoke to the importance of how Indigenous persons see themselves living with nature and the preservation of balance. And I think that stood out to me because that is something that we have often heard about, particularly when we hear about, Indigenous communities and how they see themselves as residing in unison with nature. But then she also spoke to the negative impacts that have arisen due to the overconsumption of resources and how that can evidently impact their individual livelihoods because they rely so heavily on natural resources, particularly those in the forest for their sustenance. She also spoke to advocacy among Indigenous people, as well as communication and looking and sharing information to ensure that individuals understand that their actions have consequences. And I think that was a very useful contribution, especially as it started to look at Indigenous folks. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. We heard Kerwin speak about tourism and unsustainable coastal development, the destruction of mangroves, and particularly where they have to go in to do development at the coast and how that in turn impacts existing natural resources. And he also reiterated that in taking away these natural resources, we end up putting ourselves at even greater risk or at a heightened risk. And so we must look to see how, yes, we may benefit now, or there can be a short-term gain, but what are some of the negative consequences down the line and how will future generations be impacted? So thank you so much for sharing that and also for highlighting COVID and, the importance of inclusion and inclusivity when we go into communities to develop plans for them. So it can't be, we sit as a desk and make decisions for persons, but we need to ensure they're part of the process and that they are engaged because they're the ones who know the communities more than everybody else, so they can tell us what might work and what won't. And finally to Alpha, and putting agripreneurship, I think you are the person who taught me that word, and just looking to see how food security and the importance of ensuring that, young people get in the conversation, and not just youth, but children, as he mentioned, before they're even 12 years old, understand the role that they have to play as it relates to food security, as the future farmers, as the future persons who will contribute, to the production of food across their individual countries, and then seeing how climate change comes into the mix, because then it's not just agriculture, but climate smart agriculture as we move to the future. So thank you so much for those contributions as well. And just for the final question to all 6 panelists. So we've heard about the impacts. We've heard about your specific work as champions and how you have been, helping to reduce some of those challenges. And now as we look to the future, I'd just like to hear from each of you in 30 seconds or 35 seconds. Some clear actions, some clear activities, how you see young people who probably want to get involved, young people who have heard about the Anthropocene, have heard about, climate change and the negative impacts. I've heard of some of the things that you mentioned here this afternoon and want to get involved. What are some of the clear actions or activities that you propose moving forward that can, in fact, make a difference? And I want to start with Michael.
Yes. I think there are many young persons who have an interest in sustainable development, have an interest in helping the environment, but they just don't know, how to get involved. And I think one of the main things right now is to seek out like-minded individuals and build collective power through organizations. It's very important to connect yourselves in, through discussions like this and find networks in your country, in communities that can allow you to build collective power so that you can have a greater impact as it relates to changing the laws of your country, changing the regulations, and having lasting effect in advocating for actions to help with sustainable development. It's all about building power and building a network of supportive young people who can really drive change.
Thank you for that, Michael. And I like the parts about, building collaborations and looking to like-minded people. And I think that's something that we have started to capitalize on. So thank you so much for that. Jeffy, let's hear from you.
Hello, good evening once more. I would recommend for the young people, especially in Belize, because what I see a problem is here in Belize is that the young people are not aggressive enough. So I want them to be more aggressive, to seek the institution. For example, we have financing products for young people, for alternative livelihood, for alternative energy. So they have to be more aggressive. And for their voice to be heard also, they can use the social platform that we have. So your voice can be heard because we are in the era of innovation and technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much as well. Naravni?
Yes, thank you, Janelle. Yeah, young people can actually make a difference. My opinion on this is that young people need to actually find out what they are passionate about and bring them in alignment with nature. That's the most important factor. And things like studying the rules of nature and the symbiotic interactions, we need to think in terms of integration. And when we have like mastered that, we can make all the differences that we want. Things like sustainable living, reusing and recycling, going zero waste, adopting a plant-based lifestyle, knowledge sharing, are actually small activities, but they have a big impact because the youth, worldwide is the majority of the world population. So together we can make the change we wish to see in this world, literally.
Thank you, Naravni. Silene, let's hear from you.
Thank you. My take on this would be that we as youth can document more and more about our knowledge of our parents, our great grandparents, the knowledge that has kept them alive and kept them to survive. So as a youth, I see my role especially in documenting these experiences, these knowledges, and also making it available for my peers and also for broader sectors outside of my community. So that would be one specific way to make a difference, because a lot of times we hear we have a lot of oral knowledge transfer, etc. But where can you find this information? And sometimes it takes a lot of time to travel to a community and to listen to and to observe. So I would say the best way to do is to start listening and recording and documenting and sharing that amongst our communities and outside our communities. Thank
you for that, and I agree wholeheartedly with that point. Kerwin, can we hear from you?
All right, good day, good day. I like all this. I like all those points, honestly. But I am sync more with Jeffrey's points. With the social media, definitely, I believe young people can make a difference by getting involved in environmental events that may be happening in their community. At these events, you can post them up on social media and get other people, young people involved and interested in the work that you are doing, because honestly, environmental work is pretty cool. And, I believe attending these events, it creates a connection between the person and the environment that they are managing at the time. So yeah, I definitely feel like young people can make a difference by practicing these. Thanks.
Thank you. And finally, over to Alpha.
Yeah, to all the young people out there, I think it's about being authentic, being your authentic self. Find the I in your idea, find the you in your uniqueness. Being able to really think about that skill, that talent, that gift that you have, and bring it towards impacting the community, bring it towards impacting the planet, right? Positively. You might be a musician, you might be a good artist, you might be a good dancer, whatever it may be, whatever is that talent that you have. I think we need to harness all these talents and being able to tell stories with it, inspire other people. And this is what we really and truly need to create this change. I mean, I think it's about not just having a wild imagination, but have an imagined vision. Make sure that your imagination aligns to a vision that creates a better world. And don't wait for the opportunity, create the opportunity, please. Don't wait to be asked for to be sitting at the table. Build your own table. And I think this is the kind of power that our young people, because we can't go to the table that got us in this trouble and that got us into this mess. We have to build our own table, create our own boards. We have to be revolutionary about it. I must say, because that's the only how we would create this change. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all 6 panelists, for just kind of bringing all of that together and reiterating the importance of, having a vision, aligning that vision with purpose, and particularly as it relates to creating a sustainable space for us and for future generations to be able to enjoy. So thank you so much to all of you for sharing your different perspectives and, irrespective of the fact that we all live in different countries and in different spaces, we all share similarities in the challenges being faced. And I'm just happy to see that young people are at the forefront of change, championing, so many of these amazing activities. So thank you again for the work that you have done and will continue to do. And hopefully we get to collaborate in some of these arenas in the future. So ladies and gentlemen, we've now heard from our youth champions who have, brought to the fore a lot of their views and perspectives. And now it's time to hear from you. So I'd like to open up the floor to questions, comments, and I ask that persons, if you're so inclined, you can raise your hand to speak and we'll enable your mic, or you can continue to post in the chats as you have been doing. So 2 questions were actually posed during the presentations, and one is directed towards Trinidad. So Alpha, I guess that's you from Giant McDonald. And it says, is it true that there's an oil tanker within the borders that faces a sink and oil spill? And is the government able to contact and do something about it with the owners of that ship? Alpha, can you speak to that?
So I have me a bit speechless. I really don't have any concrete knowledge on this. So I'm afraid I won't be able to shed any light at all whatsoever on the situation. I'm very sorry about that.
Okay. Well, Jide, so Alpha is unable to share, but I'm not sure if anybody else in the chat might know of this situation and can provide any clarity. But I'll move to the next question, and it's from Emma Lewis. Hi, Emma. And it says, in the context of the COVID pandemic, unemployment and economic decline, how can we leverage support from regional governments? And can anybody provide some specific examples? So just to read it again, in the context of COVID, unemployment and economic decline, how can we leverage support from regional governments? I'm not sure if any of the panelists have anything that they'd like to share as it relates to this particular question.
Yes, I would like to jump in on that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like, definitely with the region, especially being forecasted to decline in terms of GDP between 7 and 9% by the World Bank and IDB, it's important for governments to recognize that they need to invest in skills building opportunities for people, especially marginalized groups and vulnerable groups, that they can increase their ability to gain employment. I was actually recently working with Caribbean Girls Hack, which seeks to help girls get into the world of tech and equip them with skills such as digital skills so that they can take advantage of the digital revolution as a response to COVID-19. So the government's role is really to allocate funds that seeks to go into these communities and figure out how you can provide a space for more skills building opportunities, especially since people have lost their jobs, and it's really a time to pivot and figure out how you can take advantage of the new opportunities, such as the orange economy. For example, in Jamaica, our creative industries is very important, and it will be a very good opportunity to develop that industry while providing good jobs. And as we're looking to increase our food security, it's important to encourage persons to enter the world of farming, and that's the government really needs to take a good look at figuring out how they can lead that development and lead that conversation towards more inclusion.
Thank you very much for that, Michael. So we have a couple of questions coming in, but Stevenson has had his hand up for some time. So I'm going to ask if you would like to type your question, or if you would like to actually have your mic opened.
Yeah, good night. Yeah, man.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, my name is Stevenson Sinat, and I just want to say that climate change, I never really paid attention to climate change until like earlier this year, especially given the situation all over the world and in different countries. But I wanted to ask the question in terms of legislation for climate change itself. So do you think that the small island developing states especially have enough legislation to prevent all of the long-term effects of the this would anthropophones? Yeah, anglophone or something like that. So do you think that we have enough legislation to prevent all of the long-term effects of the anglophone or whatever? Something like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your question. Do any of our panelists who would like to go first? Do we have enough legislation in the Caribbean to be able to negate these impacts? Who would like to take that question?
I'll give a quick stab at it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I mean, to me, my opinion is absolutely not, like absolutely not, because, you know, we have a lot of things regarding policy here in the region, generally speaking, still to be changed, you know, because, I mean, a lot of the work that, I mean, young advocates like myself and Janet and all my other colleagues here are doing, you know, is really advocating at different levels, different fronts to be able to change some of these policies and whatnot. But, I mean, some of these legislations are very, very archaic, you know, things that were built out how many years ago when they had no clue what they were doing in terms of what will be happening now. So then obviously, no, there won't be enough legislation being able to fix problems that we have occurring now, and things have to change. And I mean, I guess, I mean, conversations like these would allow for those change to start, building all the documents, the work that UNDP is doing, you know, being able to get to governmental levels, CARICOM, and all the, you know, the bodies who may affect change in the Caribbean with regards to legislation, that they could now see that, you know, the time for change is now. Yeah.
Thank you. So there's a question directly to Jamaica. So Michael, Colin Hayes asking, what strategy do you think is best to stop the erosion of Treasure Beach in St. Elizabeth? If you can speak to that.
Yes, that's not my specific area, but I remember before a couple weeks ago we were having discussions about how there can be stronger legislation in terms of making sure that permits for development are more strictly enforced. So that's one way that, you know, we can do that, and I know that maybe some of my other panelists, I don't know if Janelle wants to talk about how, you know, the beach can be you know, safeguarded in that sense.
I think this is a question for an expert, but I do know that in other spaces, particularly in the grill, what they had advocated for was more of structures that would reduce the wave when it comes in. But I know that was advocated against because the tourist interest in the area thought it would deter attraction, because it would have been a large sort of structure that would, yes, help to break waves, but again, as it relates to aesthetic, they thought it would not attract tourists because it would kind of be an eyesore. So again, while there are structures that exist, persons were against it because they thought that it would deter persons from the area. But I do think as it relates to erosion, there are structures that can be put in place, but again, there may be pushback from the communities, and there may be pushback from a host of other interests. So again, we have to ensure that all parties can agree to whatever activities we do in fact implement. So we have a question here, and it says, the HDR talks about advancing a nature-based human development approach. What are some of the options that you think we could pursue? Celine, I don't know if you want to take this, given that you have a strong connection to, you know, indigenous groups and how they, in fact, would be looking to more nature-based or nature-intensive sort of solutions. I don't know if you would want to take this question, looking at nature-based approach to development.
Yes, thank you. Is the question in the chat?
It is, no, it's not. This one came directly to me.
Please, can I also see it?
Okay, I can share it. So it says, the HDR talks about, let me copy and paste it in the chat. Yes, so I have sent the question to you.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. So, for example, I would say that within our culture, in our tradition, we have, in our way of living, we have certain places where we have certain rules that apply. We also call them sacred places within our community. And there are certain rules that apply. Not everyone is permitted to go to do some activities. So there are arrangements to govern certain parts of our territory. And when these rules are not respected or not followed up upon, then these can have negative impacts on the quality of our environment. So my take on this is that our rules that we live by and keep our environment healthy needs to be not only needs to be more known to other communities or other groups in a society, so that they can understand how we interact with our environment. So just for example, if there is a law in an environmental law to protect certain areas, that I would like to compare that also to our way of living that needs to be respected, recognized and respected as a way to keep an area healthy and in balance. So that is just to give an example how to have more nature-based solutions, meaning that we have to have a better understanding of how our environment is functioning and the impacts that our actions have and our rules have on the environment. Another way is also something that we also use here in Suriname is that we have documentation about our traditional way of living, which is also translated into rules, village rules. We know them as village rules, and they are these rules and guidelines for our communities to manage the area. So I believe that we have to go back to the basis. We have to go back to the knowledge that our communities have, the traditional knowledge that we have, and try to understand that, and not only understand but also apply it. And this has kept us within our area where we are. And I believe that is also a solution for other areas, nature areas, where we strive to keep the balance there.
Okay, thank you so much. Alpha, do you have anything to add, particularly as it relates to sustainable agriculture and how we seek to mainstream that?
Yeah, I think it's finding that balance with indigenous techniques and information technological tools, right? It's being able to get young people excited about agriculture, and as we call it, agriculture, ensuring that it's cool in their mind, using digital agricultural techniques, but not to the expense of the environment, not to the expense of our future, and you know, for our generations to come. So, you know, I like to say IT meets IT, indigenous techniques meets information technology, being able to balance our heritage and you know, those ancestral knowledge that was passed on, or I mean, or at least we should try to make sure it's passed on by understanding our heritage, right? And ensuring that what we do, of course, doesn't affect tomorrow, you know, and this level of teaching and education has to be, again, I will always emphasize on it, has to be taken up from the ground up, you know, from the youth who's farming, our agripreneurs, you know, make sure they understand purpose before paycheck, right? So it's really, really important with sustainable agricultural practices, you know, understanding that, you know, using safer chemicals, lessening on the chemicals that you use as well. I mean, another major problem that we would see happening is the lack of bees and the lack of birds sometimes, you know, when you go into large farming areas, is because so much of spraying is happening. So again, stuff like that shouldn't be passed on, you know. You have to pass on the good practices and ensure that our youths are there to really save us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So I have another question here from Emma, and she says, how are you, the youth, planning to keep climate change on the front burner and a high priority in the minds of Caribbean people, given that there are other pressing challenges? So how do you as young people intend to keep climate change and the environment on the front burner when there are so many other things that persons have to prioritize? Which of our panelists would like to have a go? Kerwin, would you like to take this one?
Just trying to gather my thoughts.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to go? How do we keep climate change in the minds of persons? How do we ensure that it's not a one-day wonder or a 9-day wonder, but it's something that persons continue, you know, to hear about? And I think I would have a go at this question because I have been in this space for some time, and I think consistency is important. So we have to ensure that we don't just speak to some issues, but that all issues that have a potential impact or a potential consequence on the environment is something that we speak out on. And again, in Jamaica, we have seen recently where there have been activities that we think do not align well with what a lot of the what would I say, frameworks and different plans that the government has in place. So we have spoken out against a lot of these things. We've formed campaigns, we've done videos, we've done lives. So again, utilizing the platforms that we have to ensure that whenever an issue comes up, whatever challenges emerge, we keep at it and we ensure that persons recognize that it is something that they need to pay attention to and be aware of. So I think it's consistency in communication and ensuring that we utilize all possible channels in ensuring that we cater to a host of different audiences. And I think that is something that we have to continue to do, particularly as young people who are tech savvy and who have access, to these sort of platforms. So another one speaks to Belize and issues with emissions and plastics. And the person asks, what can I do as a young person to educate my country on the importance of restricting the use of single-use plastics?
I can answer to that.
Okay.
Good evening once more. Well, basically, the government of Belize has passed a law for the use of single plastic. So at some point in time, people would have to withdraw the use of plastics. So basically, but this is done on phases. So what I would recommend for young people and for individuals is to basically educate themselves, to read the law, to understand the law passed by Belize. And secondly is to become an advocate. You have to become part of it. You have to educate others on why this is important and how it would benefit the environment.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'd like to pose this question, and I think this is one that I'd like to hear different perspectives on, and it's both to panelists and if any of the attendees would like to share. And it's how do we ensure that the global alarm about this new age of the Anthropocene. So we've seen also emerging conversations about this Anthropocene era and how important it is that we reduce the impacts. But how do we ensure that this global alarm and its implications don't just remain with us, but that it is heard by the persons who make the decisions? How do we amplify the conversation from just a Zoom or just a conversation with friends or like-minded individuals to the actual persons who hold the decisions in their hands?
Can I jump in on this one?
Yes, sure.
Yes, I feel like, this is, kudos to UNDP for this platform. I think, with this report coming out, it can seem to many people as being very academic, talking about this big word, the Anthropocene. What does that mean? You know what I mean? So as advocates, I think our job is to really relate the real issues that are happening in terms of the pressures that humans are inflicting on the environment, and put that into terms, not necessarily simpler terms, or terms that are more in line with everyday life. So for example, when we talk about rising sea levels, when we talk about the increase in floods and droughts, we need to relate that to the average person and say that means that your crops will have a harder time. That means that when your crops have a harder time, then you can provide for your family. It's about those kitchen table issues that will help us to translate this like a more academic and scientific reality to the average person. And what that does, it gets them listening when the persons who are in power, such as the politicians, are campaigning. So did I hear anything about them saying anything about climate action? No, I did not. That tells me something, because I now connect the climate crisis to my life. I connect the climate crisis to not having food, to not being able to send my children to school, to not being able to take advantage of the beauty that Jamaica or like the Caribbean and other places have. So it's about translating the impacts into everyday speak, so that the persons can be more aware and then hold their elected representatives accountable.
And just to add to that, Mike, I really like that point, because it's something that we've often spoken about, is how we communicate climate change and how we break down, the language, and these convoluted terms oftentimes can, lose people. So I'm happy how you spoke about, making the terms things that people can relate to, dollars and cents, as we like to call it, and to also make sure that we meet them where they are. So if you're a fisher, we tell you that, rising sea levels means you have to probably, you can't go out, or if it is that there's less fish catch and you have to go further, it means you expend more money. As it relates to farmers, again, we hear about drought, we hear about pests and diseases, hurricanes, and we hear about the variability in rainfall. So again, it's just relating to people where they are. And I'm happy you brought up that point, because it's something that we probably need to focus more on as we move further, in trying to amplify the conversations and in ensuring that everybody, understands what we're talking about. Amanda says use social media spaces to transmit the message globally, and I agree and reiterate that as well. So we have 2 more questions that I'd like to pose before we have our final or final presentation, sorry. So it says that in Belize, is there a plan to move the country from fossil fuels? Can you speak to that, Jeffy? Do you know whether or not there is a plan in place to transition to solar?
Well, based on my involvement, on my experience working for different sectors, the conversation is there. For example, the 5Cs, the Caribbean Climate Change Office, has been involved in trying to move the change from fossil fuel to a more green sector. But it is very costly. So I would suggest for individuals to do this on a one-by-one case. For example, where I work right now, DFC provides financing for solar energy. So basically you can have your entire home powered by solar. So, or you can have your water heater, or, you're charging your phones with solar items. So I think this is a one-on-one case because it's very, the new technology coming to developing countries is very expensive. There's high tax imposed by governments. So of course, if this is the move in the future, this is a serious conversation that NGOs, private sector, public sector, and the government would have to speak to reduce taxes for us to have access at a faster pace.
Okay, thank you for that. And a question here speaks to food waste reduction and how we need to address this issue of food waste. That more sounds like it's up Alpha's aisle, but if anybody else has anything that they'd like to add. So Alpha, do you want to take this as it relates to food waste and how do we address that challenge?
Yes. I mean, the question of food waste, I think the most practical solution to food waste, I think I have two answers. One, processing more food, right? Being able to agro-process more food. I mean, I don't know if the question speaks to food that is already cooked and then we waste it, or if it speaks to
raw
farm food, raw food, But of course, in the context of farm food, we have to do more agro-processing, creating more innovative products. It's really crazy to be in the Caribbean and we are buying dried mango from Thailand. How crazy is this? When mangoes is dropping on the ground, the flies get fed up eating the mango in mango season, but yet still we are buying dried mango product from Thailand, right? So definitely agro-processing is number one. I mean, number two, where food is concerned and people who waste food and they don't consume all their foods. I mean, Agriman has a campaign called Being Rice Responsible, not wasting one grain of rice, and it's again teaching the children to be able to consume their food and think about others in other parts of the world who don't have access to this food, and you are just wasting the food, So having some life skill lessons on empathy and caring for others and whatnot, and this goes back to really being able to allow young people to become sensitized about these issues that not only affects your country, but if it's not affecting your country, but many other parts of the world where people don't have access to fresh and healthy food. And then finally, being able to develop programs where we could feed the poor as well too. So in my community, for example, I gather all the farmers and who may have excess food on their farms as well, and we develop hampers to give to the less fortunate in the community. And I think these are practices that we should develop to be able to feed other people who may not have access to fresh and healthy food. And the food might just stay on the farm and waste anyway. If you don't have a market for it or a market to buy all of it, so why not give it away when it reaches the point of you're sure you're not going to get a sale, right? So those are some of my points on it.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So if there are any other questions that anybody would like to pose, I'm going to ask that you do that now so that I can get into the final segment. If there are any further questions or comments that anyone would like to pose to the panelists before we get to the other components. Okay, so I'll move right along, and now we have a second poll and that we'd like you to participate in. So again, just take another 30 seconds, record your thoughts, and then we can just see how persons are thinking generally as it relates to whether or not our generation is ready to handle the impacts associated with the Anthropocene. So just take the next couple of seconds to complete that. Okay, so we're seeing the reverse here where a lot of persons are disagreeing, agreeing, not sure. So we have 33% of persons will have voted. Let's just take another couple of seconds for persons to complete this. Okay, so as it is right now, 36% of persons do in fact agree that our generation is ready to handle the impacts, while there are 27% not sure, 23% disagree, and 8% strongly disagree. So in looking at this, we recognize that the majority do in fact agree, but then there's also a high percentage, 25% actually, that are unsure and 25% that disagree. So I'm going to ask the persons who strongly disagree, the persons who disagreed, just to write in one sentence in the chat, what then do you think it would take for us to get ready? What do we need to be doing differently? What do we need to be prioritizing so that we can, you know, further increase our chances of getting smart, steady, and climate ready? What do we need to be doing differently for those persons who disagree and strongly disagree? Okay, seems persons aren't aware of what we need to be doing. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. All right. So hopefully persons will post by the time we complete. So at this point, I'd like to say that we have a special performance this afternoon for us. And this performance will be done by Miss Danica Thomas, who was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, who is passionate about acting as a revolutionary arts educator and is a strong advocate for the empowerment and amplification of the voices of young women. So help me welcome our spoken word poet who will inspire us to face the age of the Anthropocene with boldness and with clarity of vision. So help me to welcome Danica Thomas.
Once upon a time, there were these magicians. I was told that on the 6th day of creation, they were made from dust, given the earth as a gift for existing and told to go forth and make magic. Can you imagine being given an entire planet? They were supposed to make it a better place, supposed to maintain and enhance its beauty, bring smiles to a crowd of 7 billion faces, live in harmony with all of the organisms that existed in that space. And I guess they did for some time. But my mother had a line, she said all the time, she said, all good things started hot and sweaty, but people never followed through. And according to this story, it must be true to these magicians. Humble, curious, innocent, started simple. So they moved from riding on the backs of donkeys to soaring heaven in their flying machines in their hands. The world would become smaller. They would light up the night sky with artificial stars in the absence of the sun. Cure the sick with science. Walk on the moon in suits made of breaths. And in the same breath, they would leach the land of her lustre, turn oceans into acid, transfuse every last bit of her blood into their vehicles, exhaust the sky with their exhaust, and as if that isn't enough, they will leach all the moisture from her eyes so that the king tides brimming behind her eyelids come out in the form of deserts, and when they're finished, they will sit on their throne and watch as the world crumbles into nothing. Can you imagine having all that power and being nothing but parasites? Having the world try to shake itself free of you, having the rain force feed itself to fields, having hurricanes hurry themselves into the stomachs of the thirsty, having the sea submerge cities in warm hugs. How long do you think a drowning island can hold its breath for? See, these magicians can turn cool icelands into burning infernos. Isn't it magical? How by the year 2050, some islands like Trinidad and Tobago can cease to exist? Isn't it magical? How their greatest disappearing act will be how they will make entire species go extinct? Isn't it magical? How the actions of these magicians can demolish an entire planet, and they'll do it for profit. And because of them, one day we'll all have to flee our homes like wildlife running out of a burning forest. And when the last tree is cut, when the last river is polluted, when the last bit of fresh air is respired, when we've used up everything and made the land ugly and uninhabitable, maybe then those magicians would use their magic to reverse the damage that they've done. Or maybe it will be too late. Or maybe we'll all live happily ever after. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Wow, wow. Can you imagine having all that power and being simply a parasite? Wow. Thank you so much for that. Wow, that was really powerful. So, ladies and gentlemen, all good things must in fact come to an end. And we are now at the end of our conversation on the Anthropocene as presented in UNDP's Human Development Report 2020. And you know, today's event may have just ended, but our work has actually just begun, and for many of us continues. And now we have the responsibility of charting a course of human development that is in fact in harmony with the planet, not at odds or at war with it. And of course, young people will have to, you know, shoulder a lot of those impacts, a lot of those challenges. And we, of course, will have to deal with the brunt of the responsibility. However, having listened to our panelists, having heard of the work being done, having listened to a lot of the different groups that they have been working with, and a lot of the challenges that they hope to reduce, I'm in fact confident that the future is in good hands if we do, in fact, have more young people come on board and see how best we can collaborate and communicate towards this common purpose of, you know, reducing the impacts of climate change. And I also see that if we work together, we can help to fix this mess. So my sincere thanks I'd like to extend now to all the panelists who helped us, you know, to bring the Anthropocene and what it means into sharper focus, into a more realistic form. So thank you to Jeffrey Gomez, Michael Morgan, Naravni Salons, Silene France, Kerwin Mullings, Alpha Senon. Thank you so much, you know, for bringing perspectives from the different spaces where you live and different spaces where you work, the different work that you do in just helping us to recognize and to see what are some of the challenges, some of the things that you have been doing, and ways how other young people can become engaged as well. A big thank you as well to Danica, who helped us to better understand these magicians, and just recognizing that we have a role to play in ensuring that we preserve the future for the generations to come, that we don't look back and say, oh, you know, if we had known, we would have done this differently. Thank you so much for that beautiful piece that starts, you know, express and use the arts to kind of bring across another way again of communicating this issue of climate change and this issue of the Anthropocene. A big thank you to the UNDP country office in Jamaica, Belize, Trinidad and Tobago and Suriname for their collaboration on this initiative and for facilitating our conversations. I'm just so happy that I was given this opportunity to, you know, moderate this session and to hear from everyone and just to share the different perspectives. It was a pleasure being able to facilitate this particular conversation. And until next time, when we do in fact continue the conversation and take it to the next level, I'm Janelle Tomlinson, signing off for Caribbean Youth Speak, a Human Development Report 2020 special event. Remember everyone to stay safe, continue to follow the protocols, wear your mask, sanitize, and ensure that we keep ourselves and our families safe during this COVID-19 pandemic. Good night, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and do continue to keep safe. Thank you, everyone.